Hello, my love. You are about to listen to one powerful episode with myself and the beautiful Kristine Louise. Christina is a feminine energy coach and leadership mentor, and she has joined us today on the podcast to talk about all things feminine energy, sensuality in life and relationships, pleasing behaviors that we might see ourselves in modern society, and our ancestral trauma has impacted that, and the energetic relationship dynamics that we have with men. So if you're all about this, you're not going to miss this one. Just a bit of a trigger warning as you're listening to this episode. As you know, on this podcast, we love our stories. So we do get talking about emotional abuse and toxic relationship dynamics. So just so you're aware that that is happening with us today. And without further ado, let's get going. Welcome to the Relationship Rehab Podcast. I'm Sammy, a certified breakup and relationship coach, attachment specialist, former love addict, and spiritual junkie. This podcast is for you, the hopeless romantic who loves to love, and a safe space for us to explore and heal our attachment trauma, broken hearts, and love addictions. Together, we are on a mission to become the love of our own lives, so we can have successful, healthy, secure relationships with others. So if you're ready to create a life and love beyond your wildest desires, you're in the right place. Your journey towards becoming more secure in love and life starts now. Hello, my loves, and welcome back to the Relationship Rehab Podcast. And today I am joined by the beautiful Kristine, and I'm super excited to have this conversation with her. Today, we're going to jump into everything about feminine energy and what that means when we are dating and in relationship, and even in our business and our life as well. So I'm so excited for this conversation. So Kristine is a feminine energy coach and leadership mentor, and she holds certifications in trauma-informed healing modalities, sensual somatics, astrology, and feminine archetypes. So Kristine, she has a graduate degree in psychology, during which she first started researching the phenomenon of collective female trauma, and I'm super excited to talk about that today, and how generational traumas have affected us women lived experience today. She has taught, coached, and mentored hundreds of women from all over the world how to release the people pleaser and good girl conditioning and start living on their own terms. Yes. Her mission is to build a community where women feel safe on their own. Feel safe to explore all aspects of their multidimensional feminine in order to pursue their deepest purpose and desires. And you're currently working on your first book. That's amazing. So without further ado, Kristine, welcome onto the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. And like I said, I'm super excited to dive into this conversation all about feminine energy, generational trauma, and how that has affected us as women in our lives today, specifically how we date and how we're in relationships. But tell us a little bit more about you, Kristine. Like, what got you interested in doing this type of work?
Well, I feel like as so many of us can say, and as we've already discussed, a lot of what I teach, a lot of what I speak to is all lived experience. So it's kind of an amalgamation of my own life, the experiences that I've had being in an abusive relationship, but then also, as you said before, having had the privilege of doing research into what does it actually look like to be a woman today? Like, we all hear about the empowerment and feminism and women can do it all, but there's still some really insidious dynamics that a lot of us aren't aware of, because it's like this collective trauma is usually subconscious. So it's kind of everything coming together and then merging, science with spirituality, with my own journey, and sort of trying to really, I think the main thing is, like, when I came out of my mush and gunk and all the like really, really deep traumas that I was in and started to heal that, I remember thinking, well, I really wish that I hadn't been so alone. So if I can just help one other woman, at the time, I wasn't necessarily thinking about building a business or anything like that. I was just like, well, if I can help one other woman not feel so alone. And at the same time, like, I really wanted to understand these dynamics and like, what is it? Like, what is that about? And I was hearing all these women, throughout my life, talk about feeling small or feeling scared, having imposter syndrome, body image issues, feeling ashamed of their desire, all of these things. So it's kind of like like why? And a desire to try to understand those underlying traumas, I guess, and those like things that I was seeing and try to put a name to it. And that's what kicked off both my kind of academic journey, but also my own personal healing journey. And then ultimately, where I am now today as a business owner, as a coach and mentor for other women who want to do the same, who want to break away from that conditioning and being the good girl. And I know so many of us can relate to that.
100%, myself included. Yeah. And when we got in touch over Instagram, I loved Christina's Instagram because it really spoke to me. And I know that I personally am working on my own journey with the feminine, like being able to bring back my feminine, because I always think it's a more of an unbecoming than anything, like unbecoming in conditioning that has been placed on us. So a lot of what you're saying resonates in my own journey as well. And that's why I was excited to have you on this podcast. And I don't know about you, Christina, but for myself and other women that I coach and just have in my life, that we've kind of like amplified the masculine, if anything. And I almost lean into my masculine, I feel like, as a protective mechanism from the conditioning that has been placed on me to be that people pleaser, to always be achieving, to always get, that praise that I was so craving for as a child, because that's when I was getting that love and attention, was when I was doing good, when I was a good girl, like you said. Do you see this as well, like in your own personal journey and with the women that you work with?
Oh my goodness, yes, so much. And it's funny because I was just recording a podcast episode this morning for my membership, and I was talking about exactly this, like my journey and how I feel like a lot of the time in this space, like in the coaching world, in the quote unquote divine feminine, all of that, there's a lot of sense of almost like a perfect arc of like, I was in the shit and then I healed and now I'm better and let me take your money so I can teach you the same. And I feel like there's a big piece missing there because anyone who'll say it's a one and done, like this healing journey, it's not a one and done. It's like a consistently evolving thing and it's definitely not linear. And so one of the things that is really clear for me to see now, but it wasn't obvious for the most part of my life, was that I grew up with a dad who was I thought he was Superman. I looked up to him. He was the person who walked into the room really confidently. People would listen when he spoke. He was very educated. He was very successful. And so he was really like from a really early age, I wanted to be like my dad. And so I associated that with the masculine, with the desirable traits, as a kind of contrasted with my mom, who was much more codependent, felt more weak. Um, and I just felt like anything that was feminine was, I mean, she was really an expression of the wounded feminine. So it's all of those distorted, like manipulation tactics, like feeling very insecure, competing with other women. That's what I saw from her. So I was like, oh, the feminine, I want nothing to do with that. Obviously, I didn't have that vocabulary at 4 years old, but that was kind of like in my mind, like, I want to be like my dad. And a natural progression of that was that I chose a path in my life that was aligned with what was expected in order to be quote unquote like my dad. So my first degree is in law. I went to law school. I did everything because that's the first time in my life where I felt like my dad took me seriously. Like we weren't super close. He was very busy being away, making money, business success. And I was always like the little Pisces crybaby drama queen in his mind. So when I finally figured out at about age 12, like, well, if I say I'm going to be a lawyer, then I'm going to be like my dad, and then he'll be proud of me and he'll take me seriously. And that was my experience for a long time. So from the age of about 12, and even before that, and then until I sort of halfway through law school, that was really what I was trying to do. I was like, well, I need to be like my dad. I need to be in the masculine. Anything that's feminine is weak. And obviously, that's the distortion, right? So, to your question, that is absolutely my experience. And a big part of my healing has been actually, wait a minute, the feminine is fucking incredible. And what can we do to like the feminine to me is so multidimensional, and that's something that was a big piece. like once I started to understand that, like a lot of other things started to make sense. So it's not like, well, you have to choose between being soft and being powerful, or between being ambitious and just being quote unquote a stay-at-home mom. Like you can do all of it as long as that's what feels right to you. So I think a big part of my healing has been exploring all the like fun, juicy aspects, and I like to say flavors of the feminine. And one of the things that I also see a lot is women will come to me and they'll be like, oh, I want to be in my feminine. I just want to be in flow. I want to just, it's very kind of flip-floppy. And to me, that's one aspect of the feminine, but there's so much more when you start working with these kind of archetypal energies, to say that there's a wide range of what you can be and still be in your feminine. And you can absolutely be ambitious. That doesn't make you masculine. It just means you're embodying a different flavor of the feminine. And that, playing with that in my own life and seeing clients do the same, it's like that light bulb moment of, wait, I'm not being wrong because I'm being myself. And I think that's removing that shame of you have to be a certain way to be feminine. That's bullshit. Like, I think that's just not how it is. The feminine is whatever feels right and alive to you in any given moment. And that, learning that for myself has been really game changing.
Wow, there's so many things I want to. But first of all, it really struck me when you said, like, for your father to take you seriously, you had to do all these things because he saw you as this Pisces crybaby, as you said. It was too much and too dramatic and too sensitive and too much of this and not enough of that. And I think a lot of us can resonate with that, and wanting to mold ourselves into being someone just to get what we're all searching for really in this life, which is love, which is acceptance,
Yeah.
which is approval, which is validation. And I love to hear your journey about coming back to your feminine and what that means to you, because you're so right. There's all different flavors of the feminine. And a lot of us have our certain narratives about what it means to be feminine, especially men. A lot of men that I work with anxious attachment patterns see themselves as very feminine, but they say it in a way that it's weak, it's not good.
Mm.
It's not what a man should be. But do you believe that both men and women, or non-binary, whatever you identify with, can hold healthy masculine and healthy feminine energy in a duality?
Absolutely. And I think that, so this is something that I'm still unpacking for myself in terms of relationships. So for a long time, I had a very insecure attachment relationship with the masculine in general, including the masculine in myself, because I went from like, I want to be completely my masculine because that's the only way I'm going to make something of myself in life, to then being completely like, I want nothing to do with it. I feel like where I am now, and we might speak about that later on in terms of the journey of relationship and sensuality and all of that. Um, Really coming back to this sense of like, there are so many nuances, and of course we all have both sides. Like, there has to be balance. So that's a given, I think, in the way I see it. But at the same time, I'm also very conscious of not teaching women that if they're ambitious, that's their masculine. It's like, no, you don't have to go and source masculine energy outside of yourself when you can go inside yourself and find huntress energy, that warrior energy inside yourself. That's, you're still feminine. You're just exploring a different aspect of the feminine. So I think with everything, it's like it's about balance. And then of course, when it comes to having an actual relationship to the masculine in your life externally, I think for me, that's when the puzzle piece really comes together. Not because I would ever say that a woman is not complete without a man. That's not at all it. But I think when you reach a certain level of healing on both sides, where you can create that union, something really special happens. But that also requires a lot of groundwork before you get to that point. And I see a lot of women, in particular, who are so almost desperate to be in relationships because they don't know how to define themselves without it. And I've definitely experienced that myself. If you're a woman and you're not in a relationship, it's like, what's wrong with you? Where if a man who's not in a relationship, that's like, oh, he's a stud and he's just doing his thing. So there's a lot to unpack there. And I'm all about women fully coming into themselves, their dreams, their desires on their own. Because of course, when you are in a committed, beautiful relationship with someone, there is kind of like an amalgamation of you and the other person. And that's really beautiful. But I think you can't fully do that safely before you've figured out and done the work for yourself.
100%.
So
Yeah.
boundaries, 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 right?
Yes, 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 yes. I see this a lot with my anxiously attached, beautiful women where we don't feel safe to surrender and be in our feminine. And control very much provides that illusion of safety in relationships. If I can control the way that this is going to go, if I can, speak out about how much text messages I want per day and be able to control that amount of communication and be able to get what I need from this person and be able to almost manipulate the relationship to go a certain way and control the outcome. But that's very much being in a masculine energy, would you say? And how can we be more safe in our feminine when we are in a space of wanting to have something a certain way or control a certain thing so we can feel safe, all driven by this fear of abandonment, right? So is there anything that you have done in your own personal journey to be able to come out of that? Because I know that you've been through your own abusive relationship journey, and I would love to hear about that, how you came out of that and was able to come back to your feminine in a safe way.
Yes, I love that because I think that's so important. I'm not here to say that you cannot be in a relationship until you're 100% healed, because that goes to my other point. Like, what is 100% healed, right? I think that's a slippery slope. And I think within this kind of self-help community, self-development, sometimes people do it to the point of becoming a project. And it's like, yes, you have to keep doing the work and showing up for yourself, but at some point you also have to just live life, right? And that's when I think the kind of sticky situations happen, because a lot of the time we can say, oh, I don't want to date until I'm ready and all of that. But then a man comes along and you feel like, oh my God, I want to pursue this. And wait, am I not supposed to because I'm not fully where I want to be? I don't think it's like, it's not that black and white, like, oh, I'm completely ready. And then I start dating, right? It usually doesn't happen that way. And in my experience, it's often when we're not looking for a partner to come into our world that happens. And that's, a gift in our journey and in our healing. What I would say though is from my own experience, so I was in a emotionally and sexually abusive relationship for about 3 years, with a man who was quite a bit older than me, very established, very popular, very much looked up to by the people around him. And so I was coming out of, law school and not really knowing what I wanted to do. And I moved to a different country, and I was very vulnerable to someone like that to come along, because I was already primed to think that anything that I experienced, like my intuition, my sensitivity, all those things, I was like keeping them under wraps because that was not cool. And I didn't want to be dramatic and all that stuff. So a lot of the things that I let slide in the beginning were because I was directly quashing and squashing and killing any instinct that I had that this man is not good for you. So going through that whole experience and really completely losing my sense of self because of the constant gaslighting, the cheating, and the emotional abuse, I came out of that having absolutely no idea who I was and being terrified of the masculine and of men, because I was just, okay, well, I finally got out. I'm never, ever, ever, ever doing that to myself again. And I am sure some of your listeners can relate to that. Like, if you've burnt yourself enough, you just like swear off men forever, which, by the way, I do not think is the solution. But to cut a very long journey relatively short, because we are in time limit, what I would say is I met someone um, after being out of the abusive relationship for about just under a year. I met someone, a beautiful man, who taught me a lot about unconditional love, who taught me a lot about loving myself, and who was very, very good to me. And that was very healing. But because I was still so stuck in the past, I wasn't ready to receive that. And a lot of the time, and I don't know if you resonate with this, but it was almost like the more he loved on me and the more he told me I was beautiful, the more I doubted him because I would always think, what's wrong with you for you to be that into me? Because I wasn't that into me. I didn't think I was that worthy. I didn't think that I was beautiful because I was still carrying around this conditioning from this past relationship and also from, my past life of who I was, being a sensitive person, being, not the cool girl necessarily, being someone who didn't fit neatly in a box. And so in hindsight, I can see that I sabotaged that relationship a lot because I wasn't ready to receive someone who just loved me. And so that lasted for about a year and a half, and he did end up proposing to me, and I said yes, and then I actually broke it off because I wasn't there. And in hindsight, I'm glad that I did because we were not compatible in the long run. But after that, I was like, okay, right, I need to get myself straight because I carry a lot of the blame for the fact that this relationship was not successful. And I know that and I own that. So that's when I started my conscious celibacy journey, which was not conscious to start with, which was more like, whoa, I'm just not dating. And then it actually became a conscious decision of like, wait, let's think about this. Let's be have discernment in how I move through this so that I can actually make the most of it. And whenever I bring up, conscious celibacy, people are like, what? That sounds like kind of extreme, but it doesn't have to be. Like it can last for 10 years or for a month. Like that's really up to you. But what I had the opportunity to do a real deep dive into myself and my sensuality and my desire and my pleasure. And that was probably one of the most healing experiences I've ever had. And that's why I love speaking about it because I would have never guessed that that would be my path because I am a very sensual person and I've always been very much like I've always identified myself in that way and my worth in that way. So it's definitely been a different experience, but not one that I would have ever, 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 ever done differently because of where I am now and the things that I learned along the way.
Oh my gosh.
I don't feel like I answered your question at all. But
No, like thank you for sharing your journey. That's I mean, I resonate very much. I also had someone come into my life after my toxic relationship who was a healthy masculine who showed me
Mm,
how much deserving I was of love and how worthy I was. And like yourself, I doubted it so much and ended up sabotaging it. And I think a lot of us, meaning you and I and the listeners here, start our healing journey because of a relationship breakdown, whether it's on our part, whether we sabotage it, or on a collective part, whether we just chose someone that was not right for us and actually abusive. And I think they are just the biggest catalysts for our growth. I also went through a massive healing journey as well for myself after that. So thank you for sharing that. That was beautiful. And you said that, you took that time, conscious celibacy. I would love to talk a little bit more about what that means for you. But I think I think it's so healthy, right? To just take that time after coming out of a relationship to be like, right, before I go ahead and jump back into another one, and I call this my kangaroo girls, where we just kind of hop from one relationship to another. Let me just take a breath. And this is where we kind of
yeah.
really take ourselves out of this dating pool and date ourselves
Mm,
ultimately
yes.
and heal ourselves from the bottom up, and whether this is through sensuality or somatics or subconscious reprogramming or all the modalities that we
Mm.
both apply to our work, I think is such a beautiful, beautiful journey. So yeah, I would love to know a little bit more about what happens next in terms of your conscious celibacy journey and how you work. What does it mean to you to come back to your sensuality? Like how do we do that after such a one toxic relationship and being able to be with those feelings of holy crap, maybe I sabotaged something really, really great. And now I'm blaming and shaming and being really hard on myself. How did you pull yourself out of that?
Oh, I love that because I think that's something that we don't talk about enough. It's like there's obvious difficulty in a toxic relationship, but there's just as much difficulty and shame when you kind of quote unquote mess up a good one. And it's so easy to like beat yourself up. And I definitely did that for a while. And I think I love the expression kangaroo girl. That makes so much sense to me. But I think it starts with the fact, like I said, whenever you're in a relationship, whether it's a healthy one or not, you do kind of merge with the other person. Like you have to at some level. And so if you don't know fully who you are, even in a healthy relationship, it means that you end up taking on traits and likes and desires of that other person. And I see that a lot where it's like, a woman has one identity and then she meets a man, and not because he's abusive in any way, shape, or form, but if she doesn't fully know who she is, then it's like, well, suddenly she likes all the things that he likes and she does all the things that he wants. And that doesn't have to be intentional at all, but it can be insidious because then when you leave that relationship, like what are you left with? It's like you're missing your one half, right? And so to answer your question around the celibacy or the conscious celibacy, really it started out with me saying, well, I'm not going to have sex with anyone. And then for a while, I was like, well, I was kind of like dating a little bit, but not really. And then I decided, well, why not just kind of be mindful and be intentional about the fact that I am not going to be putting myself out there or be available. And that was when something kind of clicked because I feel like for a while, even though I wasn't being intimate with someone, I was still consciously or subconsciously available for that. And so it wasn't kind of like a clean cut, right? I was still thinking about myself in terms of desirability to others, and I was still measuring myself in like how many people are kind of like into me, that sort of thing. And when I stepped fully away, initially there was this vacuum of like, well, who am I if I'm not desired by a man?
Mm-hmm.
Who am I if I'm not being sexually active? Who am I if I don't have all of that? Like, even if you just, and I'm sure most women listening to this will resonate. Like, at some point in life, you have gone to a bar or to a restaurant or to the supermarket or whatever, and you've kind of wanted or invited that male gaze and like kind of being seen in a certain way. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But you're still asking someone else to validate you, right? So when I finally stepped away from that, it was all about, well, who am I without being an object of desire? Who am I when I'm not trying to please someone else? And that was a really big part of things for me because, as I said, I've always identified myself as a very sexual person, and I still believe that I am, but in a very different way now. I spent a lot of my kind of like in my 20s and you know uh early years of being active and intimate with people, worrying a lot about what they wanted me to be and kind of molding myself in like according to their desire. So I was like, I would take a lot of pride whenever a man would tell me like, "Oh, you're the best I've ever had," blah, blah, blah. And I would feel like that was a real sense of achievement. And it was only much later I realized that I was kind of it was almost performative because I was trying to be whatever fantasy that he wanted me to be. And again, this is not on the men. This was on me. It was on me to be like, no, I don't like that, or that doesn't feel good, or I want more of this. I just was so caught up in being like that cool girl that doesn't make trouble, that doesn't make drama, who isn't like sensitive and difficult like all the other girls, and instead just being like kind of always just what like that kind of quintessential male fantasy of like I remember even I had one partner and I was very close with him and his friends, and I took such pleasure and like pride in knowing that they were all like, oh, she's like the ultimate cool girlfriend, and there's nothing wrong with like in that as it is, but it was more, yeah, but where am I in all of that? Like who am I? Like are my needs being met? And I would say 9 out of 10 times they were not, because I wasn't even expressing them because I didn't even know what they were. So having that space in that conscious celibacy, I did a certification in sensual somatic healing, which is like a trauma-informed healing modality. And I did it because I wanted to add that to be able to support my clients in that way, not knowing that it was going to completely shift a lot of wounding I still had around my sexuality and around my desire and my pleasure and all of that, and a lot of shame about my sexual past, because that's another thing I think, and I don't know if this resonates for you, but once you start doing this healing, you then look back at the unhealed you, and then you get really shameful for the things that you used to do. And you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I let myself be in those situations or receive that energy or give that part of myself so unthinkingly. So there was a big piece I needed to heal there, and having the space to heal that and figure out my desires without worrying about what somebody else wanted or being something for someone else, that was absolutely incredible. And I would highly recommend it to anyone who's curious about that. It doesn't have to be a decade long. It can be a month, it can be a week. It's really, I think it's something that we can play with in as big or a small way as we want, really.
Mm, you're so right. Because when we lose ourselves to the relationship, we get a lot of a sense of self from our partner and from that relationship. And like you said, we get a lot of our validation and worth from being in a relationship and from that partner. But Christina, why do you think we do this? Why do you think we fall into that role of trying to please men and wanting to be perfect? And I call this my chameleon girls. We want to perform well. We want to mold into whatever they want us to be that fantasy, like you said, and please them in bed and other
Mm,
areas of life as well. And comparisons start to come up. And like you said, we take so much pride in us being the best amongst the rest. Why do we do?
yeah. Well, I think this goes back to like thinking about what it's been like to be a woman for the most part of history, at least recent history. And this is obviously something that I could speak to at length, because this is what I've done a lot of the research into about this collective female trauma phenomenon. And if you think about it as a woman, let's just go back the last 5,000 years. We've not really been encouraged until very, very recently to be sexual or to have desire or to want things for ourselves. Like our place as women was in the house. We were literally owned by our fathers and then by our husbands. Like we had no property of our own, and anyone who spoke out or anyone who was different or independent, like we all know what happened, right? Like witch trials and persecution. So it's not really being bred into us to be independent, and certainly not to have desire, sexual or otherwise. And I don't know how familiar you are, but one of the very early people to speak about this phenomenon was actually Sigmund Freud, which is surprising to a lot of people. But he had this concept of female hysteria, and his idea was like that all these women, and they're being so hysterical, and they're all in institutions, and he actually thought initially that it was because of sexual repression and traumatic experiences that had happened to these women. And then when he realized the magnitude of the problem, he then backtracked and was like, oh no, it can't possibly be that, because that would indicate that actually men have abused women in a big way. And he couldn't quite align that with his worldview. So he kind of backtracked on that theory. But I think he was right the first time, right? And if you are constantly suppressed, both in terms of your desires and your wants, and also just your everyday experience, you're not going to come out the other end feeling confident to ask for what you want, whether that's, asking for a raise or for a promotion, or if you have a partner, to ask him, look, I want you to do this differently so I can orgasm. Like, we're not really taught that vocabulary. And so I think, and this goes back to what I was saying in the beginning, although we have made great strides with like feminism and equal rights and blah, 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 it doesn't really extend into the private life of a lot of women, because there's still a lot of shame around these things. There's still, a lot of shame around these experiences that are completely natural, whether it's our sexuality or it's, the absolutely normal biological processes of our bodies, our monthly bleed, all these things are kind of still squashed down and hidden away. And so I don't really think it's any wonder that we feel the way that we do because we're usually not encouraged as we grow up. And I know you and I were talking about this before we started this conversation. Like, you grow up being taught as a girl to be the good girl, to not make trouble, to get good grades. And that behavior is what triggers love, right? And as you said, the main thing that we really want is to be loved and to belong and feel safe. So from like super, super, super early on, and like so much research has been done about this, it's ingrained in us to be the good girl and to not rock the boat. And then add on not even centuries, like millennia of very real traumas, physical and sexual and in every way. I don't really think it's so surprising that so many women feel this way. And at the same time, it's so beautiful because I think it's important to also not make this like it's heavy stuff, but looking around and seeing how many women are actually slowly becoming aware of this. There's still a long way to go, but that is a positive that I'm seeing. And I'm sure you recognize that as well. So there is hope, but the more we can create awareness around these topics and these really insidious dynamics, the more we can then move towards healing them. Because it's not enough to just tell a woman, oh, just ask for what you want, or just go after. It's not enough to say that because we carry around, like, I like to call it the backpack of crap. We carry around this backpack of all these expectations and conditionings and unsaid rules that apply to us as women or as girls. So I think that's kind of the very obvious reason why we feel the way we do.
Yeah, generational trauma fascinates me because, like you said, on a conscious level, we can tell ourselves, oh, just ask what you want, or just don't be too needy, whatever that means, and just don't
Mm.
do this and do this instead. On a conscious level, we know all these things. And also, when we bring the fear of abandonment into it as well, which is a lot of what anxiously attached individuals struggle with, on a conscious level, we know that we're going to be okay if this person leaves our life. We know that we're not going to be dead on the streets. But then when you apply that generational trauma you were talking about with
Mm.
women in the years gone by, we did rely on men for our
Yeah.
survival. We did rely on all of these things in society for our survival. So there must be something there, right? Especially with women, with that fear of abandonment, that if this man leaves our life, like what does that mean for us on a subconscious core level, knowing that generational trauma that you were just talking about. And it's interesting for me now to be back in Wales at the moment, where I'm around my family and to observe not my mother,
Mm.
grandmother as well, and how she is. And my great grandmother was alive up until I was 16, and seeing how she was. And they were, they're powerful women, but still, it's interesting to observe. And
Mm.
then this time of our lives, our generation, of how women are starting to reclaim their power almost and understand how this is affecting us now in today's modern society. And it's sad that in other countries, like I spend a lot of time in Nepal, and women are still very suppressed in those types of societies.
Yeah.
They still are seen as second-class citizens. They still are seen as possessions, to be married off and to be sold and things like that. So I think we're very privileged in a way in the Western world to be able to, yeah, almost be our independent selves and to make our own money and to
Hmm.
be in a space where we can reclaim our power and understand generational trauma and all that. But on that topic, do you feel like when we talk about the masculine and feminine energies and what you were saying earlier about kind of rejecting the masculine, do you think women are almost slipping towards the other end of the spectrum, which is being in that hyper masculine energy and being like, I don't need a man type of movement and I'm independent? Do you see that happening in our society now?
100%. And that's a trauma response, right? Like hyper independence is a known trauma response. So yeah, again, it's no wonder. And I can relate to that myself because when I came out of a terrible relationship, I was like, I'm gonna do it. I don't need anyone ever again. And that's like a hardening that isn't really natural to the feminine because if we are in our fullest feminine, we flow we were magnetic, we are open, right? Like I think that's one of the beautiful gifts of the feminine is the ability to receive. And so when we go into that hyper depend independence, that's it's kind of continuing the wounding, right? Because we're then locking ourselves away. And it's not like I'm all about independent women, I'm all about women doing their thing and like whatever that desire may be, but from a place of abundance and healing and joy and growth, not from a place of like contraction. And I think that's what happens a lot when we are traumatized and we come out of that. We stay contracted, like physically in the body, right? Like our body feels that and stores that in our tissue, like at a cellular level, our memory, it stays in that memory. So whenever I hear someone who's hyper independent, as opposed to perhaps someone who's just fully in their soft girl era and wants a man in finance. Like I feel like right now we're going between two polar opposites, which on one hand, it's like the independent boss babe era. And then on the other hand, it's like the trad wife, soft girl. I just want someone to pay for my life. And like, I'm all about balance and I'm not here to shame anyone for their choices. If you want to be a stay-at-home mom, amazing. If you want to be a business baddie or a corporate baddie, amazing too, as long as it's done from a place of healing and growth, not from a place of being completely wounded. Because then it's like we create this us and them where the masculine is the problem. And I think the patriarchy is the problem, not the masculine, right? Because like men, and this is something that I think we need to speak about as well in this conversation is like the patriarchy has hurt and wounded women, but it's hurt and wounded men too. Like we're all kind of victims of that. And so I get upset when I hear that the solution is just to completely step away from the masculine, because I think in order to heal, we have to heal together, especially because it's a collective wound. So you can't heal a collective wound in isolation. You have to heal that together. You have to hear the stories and sit with it and understand the other perspective. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't instances where there's no scope for that, but for the most part, people are good and people want to understand and people want to heal and people want to come together. So no, I don't think that the solution is just to go hyper independent and remove men from your world. I don't think that is practical, and I don't think that's going to get you where you think it's going to get you.
And like you said, it's a trauma response, isn't it? It's because we have been burned so much in the past that we then kind of fly our flag for the independent women movement. And so how do you think as women we can step away from that a little bit and start to open up our hearts and start to embrace that femininity that we all really want, I feel like deep down. And again, I can only speak for myself, but I'm seeing it a lot with my clients where we are so feminine at our core
Mm.
because of the conditioning, but because of the past traumas, we have now built walls. We built walls around
Yeah.
ourselves and our hearts. So when it comes to really starting to lean into that feminine sensuality in relationships and when we're dating, what would be your like top tips, I guess, for us ladies to be able to bring down those walls a little bit and start to open up our hearts so we can be in that space where we can invite a man in and heal together.
I love that because I mean that's ultimately the goal, right? Is that you come together in that place. Um, I would say two things that are really important in my mind. And it's first of all, obviously, as we talked about, to do the healing yourself, to you come to a point where you don't need a man, you want him. Because that's much nicer if you're a man, like to be wanted, not needed,
Mm.
right? Like I feel like that's a more flattering dynamic. So really doing that work and also doing a lot of work around discernment and boundaries. Because I see this a lot where people talk about, oh, I just want to be in my soft girl era, which is totally fine. But if you don't have boundaries and you're just, and you're lover, soft, moving through life, flowing, you're more vulnerable to people to come in and sort of hijack your path in a way, because that's just the reality of it. So having spending a lot of time around boundaries in relationships, personal boundaries, and understanding like where do I end and where does the rest of the world begin? Because that's essentially what a boundary is, right? And practicing that not just with lovers, but with family members, with friendships, with other relationships where you feel like I need to distance myself. It's a good way to practice that so that when you come into a relationship, you already know what your boundaries feel like. You already know who you are, what you bring, what you like, what you don't like. And then once you've done that work and you feel like, okay, I'm ready to open up to be more receptive and to be in my sensual, as I like to say, like my lover energy, again, working with archetypes. Um, it's the little things that start off, and it's like, yes, it's doing self-care, but it's more than that. It's kind of getting used to being sensual just for you. So this is something that I learned when I went through this healing myself, is there's a big difference between being sexual and being sensual. And very often they're kind of just lumped into one, but sexuality can be sensual, but sensuality is not sexual, right? So there's so much more to sensuality and there's so much more to our sensual experience. It could just be, it's the way that we move through the world. It's the way that we taste things. It's the way that we do things. It's kind of putting that into your everyday life, whether it's cooking a meal just for you and feeling that like how that feels to do and to just like indulge in it, have fun with it, and like kind of flirt with yourself in your own world, if that makes sense. One practice that I love that I can, I can send you afterwards. You want to include it in the show notes. But I have this practice that I really love. It takes 5 minutes and you can use it anytime, anywhere. But it's basically thinking of something that makes you feel cheeky, whether that's like it can be sexual or not, that's up to you, but something that makes you feel a certain way. And then having that memory or having that thought or fantasy or desire, whatever it is, as I say, it can be anything. It's your rules, right? It's you're playing this game, so you get to set the rules. But then whenever you move through a room, like you're at a conference or you're at a wedding reception and you feel like, well, I don't know anyone, and you feel yourself clench, like think of that memory or that thought, that thing that you have ready, and let that like embody that. And you'll see like sometimes when you see women who move through a room with this kind of sly smile and it's like they know something you don't know or they have a secret, that's the energy, right? Because it's like I think that is what the feminine is in that central space. It's like I'm open to receive, but I'm also keeping something like that mystery that's just for me. So that's something that I love to play with. Like that's just one little thing, but practices like that help us kind of tap into some of the energies that we've been afraid to because we're afraid to be too much, we're afraid to be, asking for it, all of those things. Like start breaking that down, but doing it in a way that feels safe. Um, whether it's little practices like that, whether it's cooking, whether it's doing a pole dancing class, that doesn't really matter so much. What matters is that you start to familiarize yourself with what sensuality feels like in your body. Remove from like, oh, I need to be, because to me, sexuality is different because it's something that is more purpose driven in a way. And it's something that you might have with someone else where your sensuality is just for you in this space. So I know it's like it's very similar, but there are subtle differences. And when you start exploring them, I think you'll feel, oh, it's something that you kind of need to feel in your body. Does that make sense?
Makes complete sense. And I love that you said it's just for you, because thinking back to my very anxious days and my clients as well, like a lot of what we do, and I think you mentioned it earlier in our conversation as well, a lot of what we do in terms of sensuality, sexuality, appearance, everything that we do for ourselves is actually for someone else. So I remember thinking it's so difficult to do something for myself. Why would I do self? What's the point? And
Yeah.
it's something I had to retrain myself to do. And with those practices, like you said, and training yourself that this is for you. Wear
Mm.
that perfume, that beautiful perfume that you love to wear for you. Because I remember I wouldn't wear it. I wouldn't even wear nice clothes. I wouldn't look nice.
Mhm.
Just I was just going out and no one's going to see me, I wouldn't bother. So it's about putting those practices in place. And I also had a playlist. I love your suggestion. I'll
Yes.
back to listeners as well. But
Yeah.
for me, it was a playlist. I had like my feminine sensuality playlist, and I would only have to play one song, and I'm already melting and just.
I
And
love that. Or like take yourself on a date. That's something that I started doing and it was so scary at first. Now I love doing it, whether it's just like going for lunch, having that experience for you, not like for anybody else, just for you. That is something that personally I really, really love doing. Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to put that in there as
that's
well.
beautiful. And yeah, again, a very scary thing for me to start doing as well, eating alone. And what will people think of me? We're always thinking, what are people
Mm,
going to think?
mm,
And I think that confident feminine, the sensual part of that is to be so okay in your own company as well. Whatever you're doing, cooking, taking yourself out for a meal, dancing, singing, and ecstatic dance was very much a big part.
mm.
Coming back to my femininity journey and just being able to allow myself to unfold in such a way. So that's so beautiful. And yeah, it only has to start small, right? Like you said, just like that 5 minute song or practice to be able to truly embody and to feel what it feels like to be feminine for you, because it's different for everybody, right?
Mm, absolutely. And I think also coming into like healing your relationship with desire, sexual and otherwise, because we're not really used to use it. It's like a lot of people they will use that word and they'll feel, oh wow, that's kind of a big word. It means a lot of things. And whenever I work with a client, the first thing I'll ask her is, what do you want? What do you desire? And 9 out of 10 times people will be like, oh, I don't, and it's like, I don't know, maybe it's silly. And but 9 out of 10 times she'll know exactly what she wants. She's just afraid to say it because she's not used to being asked, what do you want? Without feeling like, oh, I have to play myself down. I have to be careful not to come across too much this or too much that. So just locking in and spending some time kind of cultivating that sense of what desire feels like to you. And as I said, like with sensuality, doesn't have to have a sexual purpose. It doesn't have to end in a big kaboom or anything. It could be as spiritual as you like, as abstract as you like, but having that like I think just using the word desire can be difficult for some women because oh, it's like
Shouldn't have to.
but training yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we're not supposed to, right? Like that is such a beautiful way to subconsciously start to put that back into your life. Like that desire is not a naughty word. It's like kind of your God-given right to have desire,
Yeah.
to have pleasure, and to
It reminds me of Eat, Pray, Love. It's my favorite book, and how she kind of just goes off on to explore
yeah.
desire, to explore pleasure. And she just, put herself in Italy for 4 months to explore pleasure. And I love, if only us women could just allow ourselves that time to explore pleasure for us and
Mm.
for us only. And like you said, it doesn't need to be sexual, it's very different. Romanticize your life every time you eat, just really feeling into that pleasure and desire of what you want to eat and dance to and
Yeah.
sing. It's so, so
And you
beautiful.
know, it's so funny because one of the things that I noticed in myself when I started this kind of like stepping away from the sexual me in that way and like coming more into sort of like the deeper aspects of like what my sensuality meant, I realized how desensitized I was because it's like I'm now versus before. Now I'm so much more attuned to my sensitivity and little touches, and like it doesn't have to be full on, like, it's, I think that's the experience of a lot of us, either in a couple or if even in our own pleasure practices, like it's all vibrators and stimulators and all these things. And it just means that we're kind of overstimulated and we need more and more and more, right? So coming back to like just the pleasure of touch,
Mm.
self-touch. It doesn't have to, again, it doesn't have to be like it doesn't have to be sexual, it doesn't have to be to bring about an orgasm. That's fine if it happens, but it's more about like what does it feel like to touch myself? What does it feel like to be in my skin, That's something that I really noticed. And so I was the type of person who get out of the shower and I would just like moisturize super quickly and get it done. And now I'm like, no, why am I rushing through this? This is such a beautiful way to just connect with my body. And especially when it comes to, I think, body image issues, like we don't love our bodies, or then we tend to just like kind of look away and get it done quickly. Whereas like now it's kind of feeling out your entirety of your body, imperfections and all, and just loving all of that. And it's a lot easier if you give yourself the time to kind of see yourself and your body as more than just, do I fit the mold of beauty? Do I fit the mold of what my perfect body would look like? And be more like, well, kind of breaking it down, be like, this is my skin, this is my hair, this is my butt, these are my curves, like kind of indulging in all of that. And you get this whole new appreciation for your body and for your kind of like space in the world, right? For like who you are, because it's all of you. And I feel like so much of the time we ignore ourselves, we ignore our bodies, especially the parts that we don't like. And so that builds that shame. But when we start looking at ourselves in the mirror and like looking at that belly pouch or looking at that like butt or whatever it is that we feel is not the way we want it to be, the more we do that, the more we break down the stigma and the shame that we have literally been conditioned for so many years to hold, right?
Yeah, centuries. And oh,
Mhm.
yeah, we've painted this beautiful journey of sensuality and what it means to be a woman and to come back to yourself and break that generational trauma and be in the feminine. And my last question before we close off this incredible conversation is, how does this then help us be in relationships with men?
Well, I feel like we've already maybe spoken to this a bit, but I don't think that you can fully be available to be loved by someone if you don't love yourself. And I know that is such a cliche, but it is a cliche because it's true, right? So just like you and I have both experienced being in a relationship with a lovely man who was not toxic and who was not trying to hurt us, and still sabotaging that out of fear because genuinely I thought less of him. Like the more he loved on me, the less I thought of him, because ultimately the less I thought of myself. So if you want to be in a relationship that is long and lasting and beautiful, even if it's not long and lasting, then it can still be beautiful, right? But and I guess this is to my kangaroo girlies out there, it's never gonna work. Like you're never gonna find what you're looking for in someone else in a relationship. And you might get that initial rush, and it's so hard to say no to because it's like all the hormones are going and we're feeling all the things. And of course, it's super flattering. But if you are someone who consistently finds yourself in like these kind of revolving door relationships, then perhaps it's an invitation to just take a breath and to do a little bit of the work of like, what is it that I'm looking for, right? Like, what is it that I'm running from? Perhaps even more so, because that was the hard lesson that I had to learn, which is I ruined that relationship because I was running away from someone who wanted me because I didn't like who I was. I didn't like how I looked, and I thought there was something wrong with him for seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself.
Mm.
So by all means date, by all means be in relationships, by all means have fun and enjoy everything that it can be to be in union with a man or another woman for that matter. But don't come into it without knowing who you are, because then I want to say it'll never work. And if it does, at what cost?
Wow. Christina, thank you so much for this incredible, inspiring conversation. And if people want to know more about you and your work, where can they find you?
Well, thank you so much for having me. Honestly, this has just been so much fun, and I'm always open to answer any questions. I know some of these things are like people want to dip a toe, but it can feel a little intimidating. So I'm always open to answer any questions. Just the easiest way to connect with me is just to shoot me a DM on Instagram. That's where I hang out the most. And yeah, come say hi. I always, always, always love to hear thoughts, feelings, responses, what comes up for listeners. And, if anyone wants to share their own experiences, I love to hear that as well. So yeah, so, so, so beautiful to have this conversation.
Amazing. And we're going to put Kristina's Instagram link in the show notes below. So definitely give her a follow if you are being super inspired like myself about this conversation today and you want to learn more about being in your feminine. She's got some amazing content over there. So definitely give her a follow. Kristine, thank you so much again for coming onto the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure to have this conversation with you. I've learned so much just being here. So thank you so much. And yeah, and go and give Kristine a follow for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me on the Relationship Rehab podcast. I hope that this episode has supported you in healing, growing, and evolving out of insecure attachment and unhealthy relationship patterns and into safe, authentic love with yourself and others. If you enjoyed the episode, it would mean the absolute world to me if you would just take a second to rate and review this podcast. Every rating and review from you guys counts, as it really helps this podcast to grow so it can reach more people who need to hear this content. And don't forget to connect with me on social media. Take a screenshot of this podcast episode, share it on your IG stories, and tag me at the.relationship.rehab with your biggest takeaway from the episode. I really do love reading them. See you back here next week for another episode on the Relationship Rehab podcast.